My mother-in-law started unpacking her luggage right in our family room. My wife announced that she's staying with us permanently. If I had a problem with it, I could pack up and go. I responded, "Fine by me," and walked out. The apartment was leased solely under my name, so I ended the contract and relocated. When the property owner arrived to remove the unauthorized occupants, chaos ensued. Let me be clear. I'm not the type who accepts disrespect without standing up for myself. I'm 32, employed in the financial sector with a solid income. I've been wed to Sarah, 30, for 3 years. We're renting a comfortable 2-bedroom unit in the urban area since we're building savings for a future home purchase. The tenancy agreement lists only me because Sarah had some credit blemishes when we first cohabited. Nothing serious, just delayed payments from her student years, but approval was simpler using just my earnings and credit history. She contributes half the monthly rent to me, and we divide the utility costs. Typical arrangement. Sarah's mother, Linda, is quite a character. She's 58, separated twice, and carries this victim mentality where all her misfortunes are someone else's doing. She was let go from work because her supervisor was envious. Her landlord forced her out due to gender bias. She can't secure new housing because people discriminate against women living alone. You see the pattern. For the last year, Linda has been hopping between her siblings' home and different acquaintances' sofas. She always has a tragic tale about why she can't remain where she is. Her brother consumes too much alcohol. The acquaintances exploit her. Her spine aches from couch sleeping. Classic guilt-inducing strategies. Sarah feels responsible for her mother's plight, which I could sympathize with to an extent. When Linda required assistance with food or fuel expenses, Sarah would wire her $100 occasionally. I wasn't thrilled, but it didn't strain our finances, so I kept quiet. The trouble began when Linda started suggesting she move in with us. Remarks about her isolation, how she longed to spend time with Sarah, how lovely our residence was. Sarah would redirect the conversation, but I could sense she was under pressure. 2 months back, Linda intensified the emotional manipulation. She began phoning Sarah in tears, claiming she was sleeping in her vehicle or lacked funds for meals. Sarah would return home distressed, discussing how terrible she felt for her mother. I proposed we assist Linda in locating a small apartment or shared housing, but Sarah insisted her mother couldn't afford anything suitable. I stated firmly that Linda living with us was out of the question. Our space was limited, and I had no desire to share it with my mother-in-law long-term. Sarah initially concurred, saying her mother needed to resolve her own circumstances like a responsible adult, but Linda persisted. She started arriving at our place without warning, lingering for meals, then inventing reasons to stay longer. Her vehicle wouldn't start. She was too fatigued to drive. She'd misplaced something at a friend's house, always an excuse to avoid leaving when it was time. Sarah began mentioning how we had an unused guest room, how it seemed self-centered to have extra space while her mother struggled. I pointed out that guest room served as my home office for my 2 remote workdays weekly. We'd discussed this previously. 3 weeks ago, Linda called Sarah in a panic, claimed a friend had abruptly evicted her with no notice, leaving her homeless, pleaded to stay with us temporarily while she arranged alternatives. Sarah was weeping, asking if we could please assist her mother. Despite my reservations, I consented to a strict 3-day limit. Linda could use the living room sofa bed while she contacted other prospects. I emphasized this was short-term and she must vacate by the weekend. Linda arrived that night with far more belongings than a brief stay warranted. Several bags, cartons of possessions, even minor furniture items. When I questioned the volume, she explained she needed to bring everything since she had no storage elsewhere. The first warning sign was how rapidly she settled in. She repositioned the living room setup, shifted our items to accommodate hers, began preparing meals in our kitchen as if it were hers. When I noted she should be searching for housing, she claimed she was calling around but found nothing suitable yet. The 3rd day passed without Linda departing. When I inquired about her efforts, she said the housing market was brutal and requested additional time. Sarah supported her, arguing we couldn't abandon her mother to the streets. I reminded them both this was meant to be brief. Within 7 days, Linda had overtaken the entire living area. Her garments were strewn everywhere. She'd reconfigured the furniture to her liking, and our table was buried under her prescriptions and belongings. Returning home felt like entering a stranger's residence. Linda also behaved like a permanent resident, questioned my food choices, faulted my dishwasher loading, told Sarah my television volume was excessive. When I noted her guest status, she argued family shouldn't make each other feel unwanted. Week 2 was when I drew a firm line. Informed Sarah her mother needed to leave by the next Sunday, or I'd reach my breaking point. The non-stop presence of an extra person in our compact space was maddening, and Linda's demeanor worsened daily. Sarah pleaded for an extension, claiming her mother was actively searching but everything cost too much or was in unsafe areas. I recommended Linda explore subsidized housing or shared accommodations, but Sarah deemed that impractical for someone her mother's age. That weekend, Sarah and Linda toured potential rentals together. They returned reporting every option was either overpriced, inadequate in size, or in undesirable locations. Sarah was anxious and guilt-ridden, while Linda played the helpless card expertly. Monday morning, I discovered Linda preparing breakfast in our kitchen at 6 a.m. When I asked why she was up so early, she said she was packing Sarah's work lunch because that's what mothers do. I stated Sarah was capable of preparing her own meals. Linda became defensive, insisting she was merely being useful while residing in our home, that it was instinctive to care for her daughter. I clarified she wasn't residing in our home. She was supposed to be securing her own. That's when she delivered the bombshell. Claimed Sarah had assured her she could remain indefinitely because family supports family, that I should back my wife's choice to aid her mother rather than be selfish about space. I immediately phoned Sarah at her job to verify what she'd actually said. Sarah confessed she'd told her mother she could stay longer but assumed I was fine with it since I hadn't spoken up in 2 weeks. I reminded her I'd been asking about Linda leaving daily. We had a major confrontation that evening. Sarah accused me of being unfeeling and lacking family devotion. I explained I understood family, but there's a difference between temporary aid and permanent cohabitation without consultation. Linda overheard the entire dispute from the living room, then interjected that she didn't want to create issues but had no other options, that she'd exhausted all possibilities and this was her only recourse. Sarah began sobbing, and I realized I was losing ground. The following morning, I caught Linda sorting through our correspondence. When I questioned her actions, she said she was searching for a delivery address there. I informed her she had no authority to handle our mail and certainly shouldn't be receiving packages at our address without approval. She responded rudely, claiming she was being practical and I was overly suspicious, that reasonable people don't object to family assisting with minor chores like mail sorting. I told her she wasn't family. She was an intrusive visitor who'd exceeded her welcome. Sarah returned home to find us arguing and instantly sided with her mother, said I was being harsh and irrational, that Linda was simply trying to contribute. I explained that rummaging through others' mail without consent isn't contributing, it's breaching privacy. That's when Sarah dropped her own bombshell, suggested perhaps Linda should just reside there permanently since she clearly couldn't afford independent living, that we had the capacity and it would resolve everyone's difficulties. I looked at her as if she'd gone mad. I told Sarah no scenario existed where her mother would live with us permanently, that I'd never consented to that and wouldn't share space with my mother-in-law forever. Sarah called me self-centered and said married partners make concessions for family. The dispute intensified with Sarah alleging I didn't care about her or her relatives, said a devoted husband would want to assist his wife's mother during hardship. I countered that a devoted wife wouldn't surprise her husband with lifelong guests without discussion. Linda sat on the sofa during this clash looking triumphant, as if relishing our conflict. When Sarah began crying, Linda intervened saying she never intended problems, but families sometimes must sacrifice for one another. I retired furious and awoke Thursday to find Linda had brought in more items to the living room. Not just personal effects but actual furnishings, as if establishing a permanent setup. When I asked their origin, she said a friend delivered them. That night, I told Sarah this had crossed every boundary. Linda was obviously intending to stay forever despite my objections, and our small apartment couldn't sustain 3 adults indefinitely. Sarah claimed her mother just needed stability and security. Friday morning, I found Linda reorganizing our kitchen storage. She'd relocated our dishware to new shelves and rearranged everything to her specifications. When I asked what she was doing, she said she was optimizing the space. I instructed her to restore everything to its original position because this wasn't her kitchen. She insisted she was just assisting and that I should value someone who understood proper organization. I said I'd value her departure. Sarah came home to discover me returning items to their proper places while Linda complained about my controlling nature. Sarah asked what occurred, and Linda portrayed it as if I'd assaulted her for attempting to help around the house. That's when Sarah said the words that altered everything. She looked directly at me and declared, "Mom is living here now. She has no other options and this is what families do. If you can't accept that, maybe you should find another place to stay." I couldn't believe my ears. My wife of 3 years was essentially selecting her manipulative mother over me and telling me to vacate my own residence. The residence I financed, the lease I signed, the place I'd occupied for 2 years before Linda appeared. I looked at both of them standing there, expecting my surrender and apology. Linda with her self-satisfied expression like she'd prevailed. Sarah with her arms folded like she was challenging me to object. Both clearly anticipating I'd yield and accept this absurd circumstance. Instead, I said, "Agreed." The stunned expressions on their faces were unforgettable. Sarah began retracting, saying she didn't mean it that way and we needed to discuss it properly. Linda appeared less confident, as if this wasn't unfolding as planned. I told Sarah she'd made her position clear, and I was honoring it. I went upstairs and began packing my clothing and essential documents. Sarah followed, pleading for me to relax and talk rationally. I said there was nothing left to discuss. I contacted my friend Tom, who had an extra bedroom, and asked if I could stay there temporarily. He agreed enthusiastically and offered to assist with moving my things. I told him I'd arrive within hours with just necessities. As I packed, Sarah wept and asked how I could abandon our marriage over a living arrangement. I explained she'd already abandoned our marriage by choosing her mother over her husband, that she'd demonstrated my place in her priorities. Linda suddenly attempted mediation, suggesting they could find another solution, that she didn't want to ruin our marriage and would intensify her housing search. Too late, I thought. I completed packing and headed for the exit. Sarah was crying hysterically, asking where I was headed and when I'd return. I told her I was going to Tom's and would return tomorrow for the rest of my belongings. She begged me not to leave, but I was finished. I spent the weekend at Tom's reflecting on my next steps. Monday morning, I called my attorney to discuss divorce proceedings and learned valuable details about our lease. Since the rental was solely in my name, I could legally terminate it with appropriate notice. Sarah and Linda would be classified as unauthorized residents if I removed myself from the agreement. The property owner could evict them immediately, since they lacked legal tenancy rights. Tuesday morning, I returned to the apartment while Sarah was working. Linda was there, acting like the homeowner watching television in her sleepwear. She tried discussing reconciliation, but I ignored her and collected more of my possessions. I noticed she'd made additional alterations, repositioned furniture, mounted artwork on walls, and generally behaved like the owner. When I commented, she said she was just getting comfortable since this was now her residence. That's when I decided to take decisive action. I contacted the property management office and requested early lease termination due to irreconcilable household changes. I explained I was the only authorized tenant and would vacate within 30 days. They verified the penalty fee and said they'd send formal notification to the address. I also arranged to disconnect utilities registered in my name by the same date. Electricity and internet were mine. Natural gas and television were in Sarah's name, so she'd handle those. That evening, I returned for more items and informed Sarah about the lease cancellation. She completely unraveled, shouting that I couldn't evict them. I reminded her she'd instructed me to leave if I disliked the setup. Sarah pleaded for me to reconsider, saying her mother had nowhere else and they needed more time to arrange alternatives. I told her they had 30 days. More than Linda originally required. Linda interjected, calling me spiteful and heartless for penalizing them for attempting family unity. I told her she wasn't my family and never would be. That she'd schemed her way into my home and ruined my marriage in the process. The following weeks were tumultuous. Sarah called incessantly, begging me to reverse the termination. Linda apparently spent most days weeping and portraying herself as the victim to anyone listening. Sarah's brother even contacted me to berate me for cruelty. I stood firm, secured a pleasant one-bedroom apartment near my workplace, and signed a lease solely in my name. I removed all my personal items and furniture I'd contributed to the relationship while they were both away. I left them with Sarah's furnishings and the 30-day eviction notice. Sarah tried every tactic to sway me, promised Linda would leave if I returned, claimed they'd located housing for her mother and just needed a bit more time, offered to cover lease cancellation costs if I'd undo the decision. I told her it was irreversible. The property owner confirmed Sarah and Linda had attempted to join the lease but couldn't qualify without me as the primary renter. They also couldn't cover rent with Sarah's income alone, even if approved. On day 30, the property owner issued a 3-day notice to vacate. When they couldn't produce a valid lease or tenancy proof, they were forced to leave. Sarah called me in hysterics, saying they were being displaced with nowhere to go. I reminded her Linda was supposedly skilled at finding temporary shelter. Remarkably, Linda's circle of friends vanished when she needed permanent housing rather than brief sympathy. Sarah temporarily relocated to her brother's home, while Linda moved to stay with her other son in another state. The marriage was clearly finished, and I retained a divorce attorney the following week. The ordeal cost me roughly $3,000 in termination fees and relocation expenses, but it was worth every dollar to escape that nightmare. Sarah tried claiming I deserted her, but legally I'd provided proper notice and followed all tenancy protocols. Linda tells everyone willing to listen that I'm a wicked man who cast them homeless. She conveniently omits how she invaded my home uninvited and my wife prioritized her over me. It's fascinating how narratives shift depending on the storyteller. Sarah's brother still sends me hostile messages about destroying their family, but honestly, their family was already broken. I simply stopped tolerating it. Linda raised a daughter who believed blindsiding her husband with permanent guests was acceptable. 2 months later, I'm thriving in my new apartment, seeing someone new who finds the notion of housing parents without discussion absurd. It's refreshing being with someone who comprehends basic partnership boundaries. Sarah attempted reconciliation recently, saying she recognized her errors and wanted to repair things. I told her the error was marrying someone who didn't understand that spouses take precedence over parents. That opportunity had passed. My attorney confirmed the divorce was completed last month. Sarah received no spousal support since she chose her mother over our marriage. She also covered her own legal costs since she initiated the separation by telling me to leave. The best outcome is knowing Linda's scheme failed spectacularly. She believed she could manipulate free housing and instead obliterated her daughter's marriage. Now she's residing with her other child, who apparently maintains firmer boundaries. Some believe I was excessively harsh, but I disagree. Sarah issued an ultimatum and I accepted her challenge. She assumed I'd capitulate and accept her terms but discovered some people resist manipulation. The lease termination was entirely lawful, and I provided adequate notice. If they wanted to remain, they should have considered that before telling the rent-paying tenant to leave. Actions carry consequences, even unanticipated ones. Living solo is genuinely wonderful. No conflicts, no scheming, no one reorganizing my belongings without consent. Just tranquility in a space I truly own. Sometimes the greatest retribution is simply distancing yourself from toxic individuals. Linda discovered that tampering with someone's living situation can have devastating repercussions. Sarah learned that prioritizing parents over partners destroys relationships. I learned that eliminating toxic people from your life immediately enhances your well-being. Would I approach it differently if given another chance? I'd likely have canceled the lease the first week Linda overstayed. Could have spared myself considerable stress and drama by acting decisively rather than attempting patience. The experience taught me to trust my gut regarding people and circumstances. When someone reveals their true nature through behavior, accept it immediately. Don't wait for repeated confirmation like I did. My new partner finds the entire saga amusing. Says any woman who chooses her mother over her husband deserves precisely what Sarah received. It's wonderful being with someone who grasps proper relationship priorities for once. Sarah's still residing with her brother, from what I've heard. Apparently struggling with dating because men avoid her familial complications. Hard to imagine why anyone would hesitate to engage with that mess. The rental property found new occupants within a month of our departure. A pleasant young pair who respect tenancy agreements and personal boundaries. The property owner said he was grateful for responsible renters after our ordeal. Linda occasionally attempts to connect with me on social platforms, which I promptly ignore and block. Some people never grasp that severing ties has lasting consequences. She chose to dismantle my marriage and now faces the outcomes. The best decision I ever made was walking away from that poisonous situation rather than trying to reform unchangeable people. Sometimes the only victorious strategy is to refuse to engage in the conflict at all.